Hey guys, it's Mountain Walk, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about really awesome stuff. Again, more building a better legacy, maybe a more fun, more broken, sweet version of legacy. And we're going to be talking about one of the silliest, probably the most emblematic card of, oops, we changed it in development at the last minute before it went to print. That would be Skullclamp. Uh, Easily the most broken equipment by far, but also really fun to play with. Like during the time it was in standard, you had like the Elf and Nail decks, you had like the Skullclamp affinity decks, you had the Goblin bidding Skullclamp decks. Pretty much everything was running like Skullclamp, but it was like really interesting. Like there's a lot of creature combat. It was cool. Like lots of little dorks and all sorts of sweet stuff like that. Like it did so much cool, sweet, awesome stuff. Obviously, it was over centralizing, obviously overpowered. Think like Smuggler's Copter, which is an awesome, great card, but like two or three times better than that, if you can even imagine. I know a lot of people haven't played with Skullclamp since it was only available for only a little bit of time and very quickly was banned from pretty much everything very quickly. But it hasn't been it has been playable in other formats. Obviously, it was available in Vintage, never got banned or excuse me, never got restricted there. There are other places it's seen play. I guess Commander, although that doesn't really translate very well, over to like 60 card formats. But it could be something to look for tech. You know, Sometimes I've found tech by looking at Commander or vice versa, looking at regular formats. But without further ado, let's get into it. I've got beer. I'm so excited. I'm ready to do it. Mm, yeah, some sort of Belgian ale. Can't go wrong there. So let's get to it. This one's gonna be sweet. Okay, so there's a lot of places, and we'll quickly go through these before we really get into the super meat and potatoes of this. But there's all sorts of different decks. If we wanna, think of a deck that's really good at grinding out and doing all sorts of things and playing a lot of little dorky creatures, I mean, Goblins is like one of the first decks that really comes to mind. Sort of first deck that kind of really was like, let's just play a bunch of shit, but we'll play so much shit it'll be great. We'll just overwhelm them with just piles of shit. So Skullclamp obviously pretty amazing here in Goblin decks. They produce a ton of tokens, not even counting something like Krenko. Because typically, like activating Krenko once, you usually just like flood the board and like go nuts. Um, but there's all sorts of other cards. Of course, first and foremost, uh, I mean, Mog War Marshal is this is like ancestral recall. You could just total recall. I don't know. I guess I'm pushing it there for that kind of reference, but yeah, just you clamp up your War Marshal, draw cards. That's amazing. Um, and obviously, stuff like War Chief is so good because like you can obviously it makes it easier to clamp up your stuff. You know, oh man, so much. I mean, just drawing tons of cards or whatever, it's really good. And of course, it's really nice to be able to actually reach like your sideboard cards, which typically you can't do, at least your non-goblin sideboard cards. So that's actually kind of nice too. And of course, stuff like Siege Gang, it's great. Like Siege Gang is really good because if you put like your Skull Clamp on like a 2 toughness thing, say like your Goblin Ringleader, you can sack it with the Siege Gang to kill a thing and then draw 2 cards, and oh my gosh. Or of course Sling Gang, the newest one, who basically more or less takes Siege Gang's spot unless you're playing like Mono Red, which I guess there could be reasons to do that. I do like Mono Red's like better mana base, which is pretty nice, but yeah, Sling Gang again makes a bunch of easy, cheap dorks that love to be clamped up. That's pretty awesome. And another interesting idea is like if this was unbanned, then you have like all these skull clamps everywhere. Goblin Tinkerer starts looking pretty damn good, right? because it's 2 mana, 1/2, and you can just start eating like every Skullclamp for free. It's awesome. And then you can also, of course, eat stuff like Aether Vials, which is really, really big. Being able to have the sort of mana advantage and just part of the mana denial part of the deck, so that would actually be pretty sweet. Not a huge fan of Tinkerer, but something like if Skullclamp becomes unbanned, I'm looking real hard at Tinkerer. I'm also, of course, Crater Maker is a good answer too, but that only like hits one. And then also Trash Master, I guess that's pretty obvious. Trash Master would be good against the other decks that play Skullclamp. But there's so much to go through here, and I mean there's so many different decks that could really incorporate this thing. I mean literally just tons and tons of different decks. So let's move on. Let's not spend too much time on goblins. I'll talk your ear off about that. All right. So Skullclamp and elves. You would think, oh, this is a match made in heaven. Well, yes and no. Skullclamp's sort of worse because you actually have to pay mana for it to get its effect, and the creature dies. So this again, negative synergy with things like Gaia's Cradle, and it just makes it you're adding more um, non-elf cards, non-creature cards, so obviously it's worse with Glimpse, and Glimpse is just better in a lot of situations because it's like 1 mana draw 5 cards or something. Um, Whereas Skullclamp, you have to pay a bunch of mana and you lose board, especially for a deck that really wants to just go nuts with Craterhoof. So we're gonna have to look a little differently, I think, if we wanted to incorporate Skullclamp into the elf decks, right? So obviously, like clamping something like Elvish Visionary, pretty great. So even if you don't have, Wirewood Symbiote, you can still get a lot of value off it. I mean, of course, that goes for every one toughness creature. But it just feels good to clamp Elvish Visionary. That's like 3 cards. Oh man. Um, and then now we got some more unconventional, unorthodox cards. Again, back in the day, clamping up Wirewood Herald was awesome. So this is like a demonic tutor on like an elf, but it dies. So it's like an elf goblin matron, but the elf has to die. I'm like, interesting. But yeah, clamp up this guy, get an elf, draw 2 cards. Pretty sweet. Good stuff there. Good stuff there. And a card that you can get, Wirewood Hive Master. And what does Wirewood Hive Master do? It lets you get tons and tons of crap to clamp up, which is pretty sweet. I don't know like how much of each you would play or whatever, but I imagine if like the elf decks thought it would be better or advantageous to play Skullclamp, you probably want Wirewood Herald and Wirewood Hive Master. I would think. But I'm not an elf master. But this is just sort of like my thoughts, what I would think would happen, because otherwise, I mean, like just from like a super combo perspective, you know, Skullclamp isn't as good because it's just so mana intensive. It's better for grinding. Um, so yeah, that's what I would do here. And there's also, of course, other decks. Uh, of course, it's an equipment, so you can fetch it with Stoneforge Mystic. So, you can play it in some sort of Death and Taxes style thing. There's not a lot of creatures you really want to equip it to. Like, you don't really want to put it on Mother of Runes or Thalia, that's for sure. Or really put it on, the flying guy, the elemental dude. Oh, shoot, why can't I remember his name? Its name, Flicker Wisp. That's right. You don't really want to clamp up Flicker Wisp. I mean, a lot of the cards you don't really want to clamp up. I mean, clamping up Stoneforge Mystic's good because it turns it into an actual threat. So that's kind of nice. But it would be an interesting piece for Death and Taxes to be able to start drawing a lot of cards with. I mean, seems like it'd be pretty good with Recruiter of the Guards, stuff like that. Just in general, I think this would be pretty strong, pretty strong. Anything with the token makers would be good. So Gideon ally of Zendikar out of the board. So this plus Gideon be pretty strong against control decks. Just start making 2/2s and clamping them up, and then attacking. And if they're removed, then you draw some cards and stuff like that. So that's sweet. And of course, we've got the Pyromancer decks, either the sort of Delver style decks or something else. But these decks also have played Skullclamp in them. There's vintage versions of these decks that have played like a singleton Skullclamp or sometimes like more, two or three. But all the versions I've seen recently have only played like one Skullclamp. They only play like Snapcaster and Pyromancer to really take advantage of it. But obviously, that's pretty good. Being able to clamp up extra dudes or attack with them and then start clamping them up and stuff, and to reload and be able to get more cards in your hand and all that good stuff. It does seem pretty slow, more like not like a blue-red Delver plan because it's so slow, but more like a grindier, more mid-rangey, control-y blue-red style deck. And for reference, let's go ahead and look at that kind of style of deck. Yeah, so basically, same sort of stuff you would imagine. Bunch of restricted cards, planeswalkers, bunch of cheap interaction, free cards. Um, yeah, nothing too wonky here. But they only play one Skullclamp, and so that's kind of the only worry I would really have is like playing Skullclamp and say like this is just a card that makes like the Delver style like decks better, like Grixis or Blue Red or whatever. Um, and that seems to be maybe not the most pressing concern. It doesn't seem like that's really going to be the biggest thing because it looks like um, even here they only play one. But I mean, obviously, yeah, Vintage is a different beast. I haven't played the deck. I haven't played Vintage in quite a while. But uh, yeah, so this is sort of like proof of concept. Like, yeah, these sort of style of decks would play it. Whether that makes them a lot better or not, or whether they would outperform the other, aggro, more creature um, slash mid range, like non-Delver Skullclamp decks, I guess is to be seen. But this is the sort of little asterisk, like, oh well, maybe the just makes Delver decks or Delver style decks, blue decks, mid range blue decks better. But if it doesn't, obviously, I think it'd be amazing, a great unban. Also, it's not really much of a combo card. Like there's the Kobold Clamp decks, but those already play Glimpse of Nature, which is just sort of a better card, and Skull Clamp just isn't that good of a combo card in my opinion, just because it's so mana intensive to really get its thing going on. So that's less of an issue. So yeah, as long as we don't have these Delver decks going crazy or whatever, I think Skullclamp would be awesome and would power up all sorts of decks, which is what it's done in the past. Um, but yeah, let's move on. So yep, let's there's tons of different decks that can play this thing, but I figure we should just focus on one, and it's just the one that I played, the one I wanted to play, and it's mostly, like I said, outside of the Delver style decks with a bunch of token makers or whatever. It only really helps like the creature spammy small little dork decks, which I think obviously need a lot of help. They've been shit on too much recently. Too much bullshit. Fucking Ren and Six, and then Plague Engineer. I mean, obviously Ren's banned in Legacy, thank God. That card's just really a little too unfun to play against. Just I don't know what they were thinking about that, but Plague Engineer is pretty brutal to deal with. So yeah, this helps those small dork style attacks, which is pretty nice. And yeah, obviously this card's pretty absurd, pretty obscene. So if it's good, this is the kind of thing that certainly over centralizes things. But we don't really care as long as it just helps the non-blue decks do awesome, fun stuff like these kind of things. It feels like it turns every deck into like Goblin Mirrors. If you've never played the Legacy Goblin Mirrors, it's pretty awesome. Like there's a lot of stuff going on. Like what stuff do you kill? Do you port them? Do you waste them? Like, and then stuff can change. Obviously, like say they rip a matron off the top, and they matron into ringleader into four guys, and then you're on the back foot, and like what do you kill? Do you? So it's like it's pretty sweet. Um, but yeah, definitely a lot of back and forth. So I think the Skull Clamp really just encourages a lot of onboard interaction, but you have to really build around it. But it's obviously the power level is just pretty insane. Like I mean, this is like Necropotence level of card draw, right? This is like 4 treasure crews in your deck level of card draw, or well, more maybe in some cases, you know. So um, it's really, really strong, but uh, we just really want to help out those non-blue decks. That makes everything awesome. So let's go ahead and look. Let's go ahead and look what I'm talking about. All right. So yeah, in case you didn't figure it out, of course I'm talking about affinity. And what are we doing? You know, I mean, obviously this sort of style of deck was only available for a little while, and there have been quite a few cards printed since to really sort of help this kind of archetype. And there's a million different ways to play it because you have like a penta-colored mana base. You can basically play splash all 5 colors, you know, and so that's kind of what we're doing. I mean, I don't quite know. I mean, I think I'm okay. I think I want 17 lands, and I obviously want 4 ancient tombs. I want 1 to 2 city of traders, 2 to 3 spire of industry, and then obviously some number of like artifact lands. Do I want Darksteel Citadel? Do I just want all the colored lands? I mean, probably just all the colored lands, right? But anyways, it's hard. There's so many different options, which we'll go over a little bit later. Um, Obviously, so let's just start with the creatures. Uh, for Arcbound Ravager, of course. Ravager, in my opinion, probably the greatest, if one of the greatest, if not the greatest creature ever printed, just purely by strength, its impact in all formats, all that kind of good stuff. Spoiler alert, in case you didn't watch my older videos, but Ravager, of course, pretty awesome here. Good sack outlet. So like if you put, say, like your Skullclamp on your Frogmite, so you can attack with your Frogmite, then sack it to Ravager to get the counters. Arcbound Worker, because this lets you clamp profitably, lets you clamp stuff, and then you put the counters on one of your other guys, so you don't lose any power on board, which is pretty nice. Disciple, because you're gonna be sacking stuff's gonna be dying, gonna be clamping a lot, so you get a lot of free damage. So I want to go a little bit more of a combo-y approach, and add a little bit more like I guess synergy with Skullclamp. So I figured Disciple be worth playing. Ornithopter, of course, and Frogmite and Memnite, because they're all free basically. Frogmite pretty much always free. And a Tog, an old school one, but a Tog is sweet, another sack outlet, and we make a lot of cards, a lot of artifacts, and that's very good because it gives us a whole shitload of damage. So that's sweet. And then, of course, for our spells, we got, you know, Mox Opal, Springleaf Drum. Again, these are pretty much staple for buffing up our board, being able to fix our mana, all that good stuff. For Skullclamp, of course, Welding Jar is just another free card, which is great, and pumps up our affinity and saves our Skullclamps or our Ravagers, or our Cranial Platings or Genesis Chambers. Again, Cranial Plating, I'm only playing 3. Skullclamps should let us play more of them, or give us more access to them, and obviously too many Cranial Platings, pretty dirtily. And then, of course, Genesis Chamber. Now, this is one I thought would be interesting because basically very few other decks don't really play as many guys as you do. And then this one actually, when I was playing with the deck, Genesis Chamber did produce like a ton of guys, and obviously that's a bunch of free stuff to either sack a Ravager or a Tog, and then deal extra damage with Disciple. Or just attack and block and clamp up, or just it does pretty much everything. So it's pretty sweet. A little slow, but it definitely played out pretty well. So I like that quite a bit, because sometimes it almost felt like I was kind of running out of creatures. Like sometimes I just wouldn't draw enough when I was just clamping everything up, you know. So sometimes that can leave you vulnerable to spot removal. It felt like. Just due to bad luck, right? But Genesis Chamber sort of, you know, changes that all up. You don't really have to worry about clamping your own dudes. Okay, in the sideboard, mostly just stuff against like interaction, like the hate cards people will bring in, or just against combo decks and stuff. Oko, of course, something I thought about playing main deck. I mean, this card just sort of does literally everything. I mean, you have infinite cards. But, I mean, you have so many elks. Like, look how many elks you have. Like, everything in here could become an elk. That's amazing. Well, some of the lands can't be elks, but yeah, everything becomes an elk. That's sweet. It deals with big creatures on your opponent's side, which become elks, but that doesn't really help them too much because you have so much bullshit, like cheap crap on your side that they can't push through. And you can, yeah, you can make your random crap like, oh, my Springleaf Drum is an elk now. My Vault of Whispers is an elk. Pretty crazy. Um, Obviously, even just the extra life is really good for racing and like, which buys you more time, which gives you more time to be fucking around with Skullclamp. So, ooh, excuse me, it's pretty ridiculous. Spell Pierce, Mindbreak Trap, Thoughtseize, Torment's Crypt, Cage, blah 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 blah. I mean, that's just anti-combo stuff. What would be the best combo stuff? I'm not 100% sure, but these are all cards I've seen play. Oh, I misspelled Thoughtseize. Oh god, just kill me. I hope no one sees that. And of course, Welding Jar. I love Welding Jar. This card's pretty sweet. Saves all your stuff, which is I'm a big fan. Big fan. Yeah, there's a lot of different stuff. I originally had Mirror Enforcer in here as like a 2 of, but I took him out for a Tog. Mirror Enforcer is pretty sweet. I mean, just because it's free, you can cast him off. You're drawing off Skullclamp and stuff, so you can cast him for free. Um, Brood Star is just something I thought of, but I mean, it's probably not very good. But it was something I was considering just because it gets really, really huge. I thought that might be kind of interesting, but probably not very good. Emery, I'll talk a little bit more about later. Then there's like Shrapnel Blast, Galvanic Blast, stuff like that, which is obviously just more burn, which I'm not sure is really needed or not. Signal Pest, which is really great with Genesis Chamber, pumps up all your stuff, only costs 1, which is really nice, so it's better than stuff like the blue artifact guy that pumps up your stuff. The one from Shards Block. Master of Ethereum, that guy? Yeah. Thoughtcast, I mean, if we're looking for more draw, Thoughtcast is obviously where we want to be. Somber Hoverguard, yeah, that's just another affinity guy. That might be interesting. More evasion, which is kind of nice against stuff like, say, True Name Nemesis, crap like that. Broodstar again, because I'm still thinking about it. It still seems bad, though. Academy Ruins. This, again, recurs all your stuff, and you can just play a singleton. So it wouldn't take up much space. So that seems like it might be interesting. Enlightened Tutor, which is also, I mean, just a way to get all of your your artifacts and crap. I mean, whatever, probably not. You probably want to play the one from like Fifth Dawn, the Equipment Tutor to get like Skullclamp. That seems a little better maybe, but Enlightened Tutor obviously gets more different cards. Anyways, Meddling Mage, Therapy, Dispatch, Swords, Path. Maybe even Galvanic Blast would be like board cards. I mean, maybe Galvanic Blast main deck, but if we're looking for ways to fight hate, those are pretty good. Obviously, Meddling Mage has been played, and like the old Affinity decks, notably Pierre Canale's winning deck from 2005 extended, played Meddling Mage to very, very great effect against stuff like Meltdown and crap like that. So it could be useful. Blinkmoth / Inkmoth Nexus is additional ways to beat up on control decks, being able to put your counters on your manland, or just another threat that dodges sorcery, speed sweepers, or removal spells. Oh yeah, say something like opposing Okos, be pretty good there. Um, Again, that's something that I could definitely see playing if if my mana was good. It's just like, okay, just probably cut a City Traders and a Spire of Industry for 2 Blinkmoth Nexus. Steel Overseer, just something I was thinking about, like, hey, this might be kind of interesting. I mean, it's a little slow, obviously. Toporor, Dampening Sphere, Thorn of Amethyst, Europer, Aether Grid, more sideboard stuff. Gingerbrute, that seems kind of cool. I like that card because it's one drop and it's basically unblockable. So that's pretty strong, and you can even sack it for life because it's a food. But yeah, this guy's pretty good with cranial plating because I think he can't be blocked except by creatures with haste. I mean, you can't catch the Ginger Brute, man. Man. Vault Scourge, again, this is typically played in most affinity lists. Obviously, very, very good with cranial plating. I don't know. I mean, this seems like less of a cranial plating deck and has felt more like a Skullclamp deck. Probably don't need Experimental Frenzy or Mystic Forge. Winter Orb, pretty sweet. I should probably put that in there somewhere. Winter Orb is awesome. Lotus Petal, again, mana fixing, more affinity. Enlightened Tutor again, because I'm still thinking about it. Steel Shaper's Gift, because that's the card I was thinking about from 5th Dawn. Meddling Mage again. Cabal Therapy again. And Red Elemental Blast. These are all cards I'm thinking about a lot. So yeah, there's all sorts of different things. I mean, literally anything you think of. I mean, and for the mirror, you can play like Hercule's Recall, right? Pretty sweet. Yeah, so Wizards seems to be mostly okay with like certain lopsided matches. Like that doesn't seem to be a big deal because there's a lot of really lopsided matches. Like just think of, random think of like playing Death and Taxes versus Elves, that kind of thing. So it doesn't seem like they really care too much about like certain decks just pretty much always beating other style of decks. So if it's like, oh man, these Skullclamp decks or whatever, or this one Skullclamp deck is too good at grinding or something, like I don't, I can't see them giving a shit. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they give a shit. They're like, these non-blue decks are doing good stuff. Ban. Who knows, right? Obviously, we gotta watch out for stuff like Null Rod, which is whatever, doesn't it sees a little bit of play. Who knows what the meta would look like with this unbanned, but yeah, having a way to deal with Null Rod, so maybe something like Seal of Cleansing, or I guess the green Seal of Primordium, or just Disenchant or something. That might be interesting, might be useful. So just something to keep in mind. But yeah, the great thing about being able to play more or less 5 colors, more or less easily, painlessly, is that you can choose from, well, pretty much any card that you want. So yeah, that's pretty sweet. And Emery. So let's talk about this a little bit. This card is pretty insane. So it dumps stuff in your graveyard, costs 1 mana, pretty much almost always, and recur stuff. So you can recur welding jars, you recur your skull clamps, recur anything else that's countered or destroyed, recur things that you say, like sack your Arcbound Worker to your Arcbound Ravager, replay it with Emery. I mean, that's pretty sweet. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do. So, that might be interesting. So I was thinking like maybe playing 2 Emerys in place of the Atog, but I mean, depending on, I want to go with a more aggressive stance, instead of like playing Emery, which is a little dirtily, but does give you pretty good card selection, does give you resiliency to spot removal and stuff. But I mean, Skullclamp basically already does that. If people are trying to play fair with you when you have Skullclamp in play, that's typically not a good place for them to be in. It didn't work. It didn't work in standard. I can't imagine it's really going to work any better now. But yeah, Emery is pretty insane. It might be something to look into later on. So I'll drink to that. Shit. So yeah, that's pretty much where I was going with. The deck was pretty sweet. Disciple felt pretty good. I was always pretty happy when I got Disciple, because I could just keep drawing cards and drawing into more stuff, and then still making progress even though I'm losing stuff on board. Especially if you have a Genesis Chamber, because Genesis Chamber produces more guys when you play stuff or whatever. Yeah, still thinking maybe I kind of want Mirror Enforcer just because having more free stuff is sweet. But yeah, I kind of like the list as is. I do like playing a Tog again. Obviously gives you pretty pretty explosive turns, which is nice. I like that quite a bit. So yeah, being able to actually do stuff with all your crap and just really go for the mega turbo kill is nice. It's definitely been useful in the past, and it's pretty nice when you have even more crap lying around because you just have drawing tons and tons of cards and you can play pretty much everything. So that's why I put Frogmite and stuff in there because, well, it's, you draw all these extra cards, gives you more board presence, gets crap out of your hand, lets you draw more cards, that kind of thing. Kind of gives you that whole feedback loop stuff. So yeah, that's kind of why I wanted more Mirror Enforcer, maybe more Mem Knight or something. But anyways, so there's all sorts of stuff you can do. I guess you could even play Karn, a couple of Karn. You can wish for stuff. That might be kind of interesting, but yeah, so that's pretty much it. I mean, I could probably go on forever, but TLDR, if unbanning Skullclamp doesn't just make the blue decks, the Delver style decks, just too good, it should probably be done because A, it's a fun card, B, even broken cards need a place to be played or whatever the fuck Aaron Forsyth said. So I mean, you should unban Skullclamp because that'd be sweet. That'd be super sweet. Fucking let's do it. Let's do it. Let's have some fun, right? Yeah, this is definitely one that's like super strong and would obviously like be broken and somewhat over centralizing, but who cares? This card's awesome. When was the last time anyone played Skullclamp in like an actual tournament? Forever ago? Yeah. So, anyways, that's it, guys. This is just my ideas. I thought about this a lot. I've been playing this deck quite a bit. It's been pretty sweet. I like it. So, freaking unban Skullclamp. So, thanks for stopping by, guys, and have a great day.